probably be better able to suggest it, but
we'll ask Adam later.
We'll ask him later.
All right,
but yeah, no, I mean there are definite ways. You know, there's some research to suggest that the problem isn't people who are denying science. The problem is that they are politically in a certain mindset that goes along with denial of science. And that when you simply reframe the argument in a different way, that they will actually agree with you, and then you can work together towards that common cause. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that, but ultimately I think the main problem is getting enough people to just care about the issue. You know, it's not, to me, the problem isn't even, like there is a huge problem, obviously, with people denying the science, and especially corporations and people like in the US, the Koch brothers, who are funding anti-science sort of propaganda. That is a huge issue. But for the most part, this is just not, it doesn't even rank on the scale of problems that people consider, because we have so many other day-to-day issues that we're concerned about. Things like, you know, poverty levels, things like democracy. You know, there are all these things that we need to fix right now that we get distracted, you know, with good reason, from these long-term goals. So this came up on SGU fairly, I'm not sure, it might have been the one, no, not the one, you were in the, wow, I just started a sentence like 5 times, I apologize. We did an SGU that I don't think is aired yet, where we had a chat room with some listeners in it that were asking questions that you were in on.
Yeah, I was on that one as well.
Yeah, and someone asked the question of, oh God, what was it? My train of thought just went off a cliff. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem. We can move on to another question and come back to it when it comes to you, because it probably will.
It will probably...
Was it related to global warming?
It was absolutely. I wasn't going that far away.
No, I'm trying to help you.
Yeah. Oh, shit. I'm so sorry.
No sweat, no sweat. So look.
It really is the jet lag.
So that's...
And maybe this...
so let's move on to some other questions. You know, that's you know, the way out, right? That's the looking at 30 to 60 years, generations from now, right? Yeah. But what about the youngest generation that's out there right now?
Oh, I thought it was.
I knew you would. See how that works?
Someone asked,
research says.
Someone asked, I'm so sorry.
It's not a problem.
Someone asked, you know, what's like the main thing we should be focused on, you know, not as far as like a large issue, but on a, just sort of the basics of skepticism sort of issue. So we were talking a bit about teaching children critical thinking from early ages, which I think is absolutely critical. But I said that my main thing was income inequality, because if we ever actually get around to fixing the growing income inequality, that solves so many other issues that allows people to stop worrying. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, we fix these people who are constantly having to struggle to find shelter and food and a general feeling of safety. Universal health care, you know, these are the issues that once we get all of that down, we can, as a society, move up and start focusing 30, 50 years in the future. Like, okay, we've got this stuff down, we can stop sweating it. Let's focus on this stuff that's actually going to end humanity. Anyway, go on, I'm sorry.
These are good goals, definitely good goals. So that's the 30 to 60, you know, a couple of generations out. Let's look at the youngest generation right now. And because I know we have audience members here who have young children, some daughters, some sons. And what would you recommend for, let's say, children of 5 to 15 years old? Actually, I'm not very good with those kinds. 5 to 10 years old. But what should their parents be introducing them to? How do they introduce the concepts? What books should children of that age read? And in particular, what books should girls of that age be reading so that they grow up with an interest in science and technology and engineering and math?
Everything. I mean, I grew up and I don't have kids, so, I mean, don't listen to what I say on this issue, ultimately.
But you talk to kids.
I do talk to kids. And
you recommended some great books yesterday. What did you recommend?
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, but not for the 5 to 10 set.
No,
I was recommending, you know, Demon Haunted World to me is like, the primer, the book that you give a friend who's getting interested in skepticism. But for younger, I grew up in a household where I'm extraordinarily privileged in this sense. I grew up with parents who loved to read and who had bookcases full of books that I had access to constantly, and a bookmobile that came through town, and I was just constantly, voraciously reading. And, I worry sometimes that, there are people out there that don't place an emphasis on reading. And I think for me, one of the reasons why I'm a skeptic, I referenced this earlier, is because of critically reading things. Reading and being interested in what is this author trying to tell me. I think it's so important to understand. It teaches you a very basic thing about how what is on the surface is not necessarily the only message. You need to read between the lines. You need to understand the story. You need to look deeper. I remember when I was 9 or 10, I read through the entire catalog of Agatha Christie because my English teacher was a fan. And I loved it, and it taught me how to look for these little clues that she's going to drop throughout the book and put them together.
And then you tweeted spoilers, right?
And then I tweeted all the spoilers. You keep bringing this up. He's bringing this up because last night I told him that one of the things that I like to do to people on Twitter who send me really nasty messages, things like, I hope you get raped and I'm going to kill you, I just send them a private message with spoilers for Game of Thrones. Because I read all of the books, and so this was back when the most recent season was airing on HBO. So I will not spoil it for you, but I would just send them a message that's like, FYI, in the next episode, X kills Y with a blah, 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 and then this happens. And just like nothing else, just like a straight up spoiler, and it just makes me giggle to think about it.
So what do you think is the most, of all your years in skepticism, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned? What would be the thing that you would want to tell somebody else who is just starting out or trying to get skepticism going in their hometown?
To get skepticism going in their hometown.
Well, what's the big thing that you've learned from being around? Like, do this, don't do that, or I did this and it really worked.
Gosh, I think what worked for me was just doing it. That's so.
Just don't stop.
Yeah, I just decided. I was in Boston, and Skeptics in the Pub didn't exist, so I just did it. And what I found was that if you put in the effort, you will find the people that will help you continue on. And so for me, I started out just by calling local bars and found a space for free, and called local smart people and found somebody willing to give a talk for free. And the first one, someone showed up and said, hey, do you want to film these? Because I run all of the AV for Harvard University and I can just bring some cameras. And I'm like, okay. And so that's how it snowballs. And you just, if you're thinking about getting more involved in this stuff, if you're thinking about starting an event, or if you want to start, if you have some expertise that you think is worth sharing, but you're hesitating because you think maybe nobody will care, or maybe you're not good enough, just shut that voice up. Just do it. If it fails, it fails. But for the most part, I see so many people coming out to events like this and then going away inspired and doing something that is incredible, like starting their own event in their town, or starting a blog, or joining Skeptic, or doing a podcast or something like that, or doing grassroots campaigns. In the UK, they've been very successful at doing things like, someone decided, I'm going to go after chiropractors who are making false claims on their websites. So someone wrote, he was a programmer, so he applied that to his passion for skepticism. He wrote a program that crawled chiropractors' websites and found claims that were fraudulent and automatically reported them to the advertising authority and got the chiropractors put out of business, basically. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was like hundreds of websites were taken down within a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and changes as well. It was pretty amazing. Okay, well, listen, earlier Gaz handed out some cards and some pens, so if anybody wrote down any questions, if they want to hand forward, they can do that now. But my last question for you is, tell us something about yourself that doesn't have anything to do with skepticism. Tell us about some other aspect of your life that's non-cat related that we can, just tell us something maybe we probably don't know about you. I think that's interesting that will intrigue us, so we can wrap it up.
Well, that's not fair because I have the world's best cats.
Okay.
And they're
Go
always,
with the cats, then.
Gosh, something that's not. See, one of the things about me is that
What's your favorite book?
Oh, my favorite book is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco.
Yes.
Yeah, all right, a few fans. It's beautifully written, and if you've never read it, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but just so you get an idea,
I meant Book of the Bible.
Oh, I said obviously Leviticus. Favorite nonfiction book? Ooh. I would say maybe Simon Singh's Big Bang Theory. Wait, what's it called? Is it just called The Big Bang? Does anybody know The Big Bang? Or actually his Fermat's Last Theorem. Simon has a really amazing way of writing about science history in a way that brings it to life, and he tells the stories of scientists in ways that really help me process it as somebody who loves stories and has not always loved science. It helps put things into context and realize, I know very little about mathematics, but when I read Fermat's Last Theorem, now I get it. I get this really complex idea and why it's important and what happened and all of the weirdo personalities behind it. It's just a really gripping story. I could talk about my favorite books all night if you want.
Actually, I think you've done a pretty good job. Are there any questions? Oh, I got one.
I hope what's your next favorite?
I will.
Cheers, thanks. Any others? Send them forward, guys.
A long one.
Any others?
Yeah, there's more coming.
Cheers, thanks. Nope, okay, that's it. All right, great. What do you think of Penn and Teller?
Penn and Teller, I said that James Randi got me into skepticism, but if you go back one step further, it was Penn and Teller. When I was probably 13 or 14, I picked up, there was the one about playing in traffic, and one about food, playing with your food. Anyway, I was into magic, and I picked up their books, and they fit me perfectly, like weirdo, bizarro, sarcastic magic tricks.
Gotta be pretty weird to be a libertarian.
Yeah. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know anything about their politics. But things like, when you're at a diner and they have those little cups of creamer, those little plastic cups. This was my favorite thing to do, and it made my parents furious. But basically, you just, when no one's looking, you just grab a little creamer and hide it in your hand, and then ask people if they want to see a trick. And then you grab a knife off the table and hold your hand up like this, and then just stab the knife into your eye and squeeze the creamer, and white stuff just bursts out of your eye. As a 13-year-old, that is the greatest thing I had ever heard of in my life.
Right, so Andrew, in answer to your question, what do you recommend to your 10-year-old?
I would, unfortunately, a number of those, I think those books are all out of print, sadly. But they were brilliant, and they did mention James Randi in those books, and that's how I found out about Randi. since then, and you know, this is why when you first asked me, like, what's the main lesson I've learned, before you asked specifically about, you know, people who want to get more involved and start things, like, really the main lesson I learned is never meet your heroes. Not never meet your heroes. It's actually more like, always be critical of your heroes. Know that your heroes are human and that you can appreciate one aspect of them while still completely, you know, hating another aspect. And so it is with Penn. Penn is, in a lot of ways, like very intelligent, very funny, very talented person, and in other ways is very hateful and very ignorant about a number of social issues and
Be
things like that.
specific.
He once called a woman a hot bucket of fuck at TAM. I'm sorry, are there any children here? No, this is a bar,
There
right?
aren't now.
Okay.
You just made them grow up.
Yeah, no, just like at TAM, like in the middle of a hallway, you know, you're at a skeptics conference, he's there working, and a woman walked by, and he said, oh, she's a hot bucket of fuck. You know, and it's like, oh,
So-
you're so edgy. And so, you know, but to him, he's like, freedom of speech, I'm edgy, this is super cool. And he bristles about the idea of like, well, you know, maybe women don't want you to shout out in a crowded hallway about what a hot bucket of fuck they are.
So what do you do? What does a guy do? What does a woman do? How do you handle that extreme level of misogyny?
Well, I mean, I say, like, if you're there, you call it out, especially if you're a guy, because men listen to other men. If a woman says, hey, that's not cool, then she's a harpy. If a guy says it, you know, maybe he's a white knight. But the more people we have in general who are standing up and saying, hey, that's not cool, don't say that, the more we raise the social cost of being a bigot. And the less we'll have bigots shouting things at women in hallways at conferences.
Isn't white knight even a misogynist term, though?
Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah. Or mangina. Yeah, oh yeah. Which, the first time I heard it, I'm like, is that like when men get heart problems? Like, that's what I thought that was. But yeah, it's insulting a man by comparing him to being a woman, because a woman is the worst thing you can be.
But I actually meant, like, you know, women do not want men to be their rescuers, but they do want them to stand up against other men.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not about being rescued. It's about men taking responsibility and not allowing that locker room sort of
Any more than you would around racism, right?
And yeah, you know, it's. I see it. The same thing happen with racism. Being a white person, I've been in groups of white people who say racist things, and it can be really awkward to speak up about it. But as a white person, it's really important that I speak up about it, because when a person of color speaks up about it, they risk getting the shit kicked out of them. They risk being fired from their jobs or ejected from their social circles. But as a white person, the worst that can happen with me is I get a little bit of ribbing for being PC. And it's the same thing with men. You know, there's that Margaret Atwood quote about how men are scared that women will laugh at them, and women are scared that men will kill them. When a man says something misogynistic, this has happened to so many women. It doesn't happen to everybody, thank goodness, but it's happened to a lot of women I know. You'll be like on public transportation and some guy will say like, yo baby, what's up? What's your name? And you'd be like, I'm not interested. And sometimes that's fine, he'll turn around and walk away, but there have been a number of times when suddenly it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you, bitch? And then suddenly we're in a violent encounter and I'm scared for my life. With men, that doesn't necessarily happen nearly as often. With men, when you say, hey dude, that's not cool, you don't have to say that about her. Respect her a bit more than that. You're probably not going to get killed. I mean, women probably won't be killed too, but, you get what I'm saying.
I absolutely do. Want to talk a little bit about politics?
Why stop now?
All right, so how would you describe yourself politically?
We're going to China tomorrow, and I don't want to mess up my visa. I'm an American liberal who thinks that American liberals are too conservative. My
So
eldest.
basically, you're a Canadian.
Keep going. My eldest brother is a conservative libertarian who, for my birthday once, sent me a T-shirt that said "Hippies smell." So I'm a smelly hippie, basically. I used to canvass. A job I had when I lived in Seattle was canvassing for a group called Progressive Action Network to improve Medicare to include prescription medication. So basically I went door to door asking people for money to help elderly people afford their prescriptions. And so that's how much of a hippie I am.
That's pretty cool. So, I mean, there's a lot of money in politics in the U.S. Do you think that that's a problem? In Canada, we have very, very strict, I say in Canada like we're there. The Canadians have very, very strict policies that reduce the amount of money that can be spent on elections. Any opinion on that whatsoever?
No.
All right.
Yes. Yeah, it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem, and there have been, luckily in the U.S. we do have a number of people who do exposés on this, and our best ones come from satirists. So Stephen Colbert did a really great exposé of the idea of super PACs, which are ways to funnel huge amounts of money to candidates. And yeah, we have a huge problem with our lobbyists. The pharmaceutical industry is out of control in the United States. It's why when I lived in Seattle and I was doing that canvassing, I can't tell you how many people I talked to, elderly people who were getting on buses to go to Canada just to afford their prescription medication. And so yeah, the pharmaceutical industry is out of control, the oil companies are out of control. And it's one of those things that, I align with that super liberal hippie left. And then occasionally they'll be like, yeah, and also vaccines, right? And I'm like, whoa, and we're done.
All right, last question. Last question for the night, and we're going to wrap it up. You're going to stick around for a while? All right,
yeah.
So if you want to have any questions for Rebecca, you guys can ask her later.
Yeah.
But my last question is, what are you most hopeful for the future?
Well, I'll say that, obviously we've talked about it a bit tonight, and it's something that comes up again and again and again in interviews that I do with mainstream media, which is about harassment of women. And, obviously it happens within the skeptic community, it happens within the atheist community. Not just them, also tech, also STEM fields in general, video games. But no matter how much harassment that's happening, that's being publicized, ultimately I believe that it is getting better, that we are kicking over rocks and exposing bigotry that otherwise was just an ugly undercurrent, to mix metaphors horribly. That was silencing women and other marginalized people, and other people didn't realize it. Women were being harassed, women were feeling uncomfortable at events like this, but instead of making a ruckus about it, they were just leaving and never coming back. And now it's been exposed to light, and we are all collectively having this conversation. And ultimately we realize that it's this small minority of people who are being vicious, who are attacking women, or in more subtle ways driving them out of our movement. And we're beginning to realize that, and the majority is beginning to recognize that and standing up and saying, this isn't okay. We want skepticism to be a large umbrella. We want a wide diversity of people involved, for a wide diversity of issues that we can address, so that we can ultimately make the world a better place. And that is absolutely happening. When I first started going to conferences, like that first TAM I went to, the male-female breakdown was, 80-20. And in that 20, it was a huge number of wives and girlfriends who were like, yeah, I guess we're here now. I'm just gonna
gamble.
Right. But you compare that to today, and there are many places I go, especially conferences like Skepticon, where they specifically focus on getting more women up on stage and making more women feel comfortable in the audience. Other organizations that are providing child care and things like that for their attendees. And I've seen the audience breakdown start to at least come closer to parity. And I have now met, like, I get, like, my heart swells every time a woman comes up after a talk and says, you know, I'm a big fan, I dragged my boyfriend here. You know, I love that. That is exactly what we want, because there's so many issues that are directly impacting women and other marginalized and oppressed people that are perfect for skeptics. Like in the United States, we have the religious right using complete and utter pseudoscience in order to restrict women's access to health care. Selling this idea that the Plan B emergency contraception is abortion, completely made up. Or the idea that fetuses can feel pain at 20 weeks, completely made up. Skeptics are well positioned to join together with feminist groups that are saying bullshit. And they're starting to do it. You know, we're seeing much more of that joining together of forces. And once you do that, you start having women say, oh, you're talking about something that impacts me, something that I'm directly interested in, let me get involved. You see the same thing, the more we talk about stop and frisk laws in the United States, which unfairly target people of color. If you look at the stats coming out of New York City, they show that stop and frisk laws don't catch more criminals, they just inconvenience more people of color. Those are scientific statistics that we have that we can use to say this needs to be fixed. And then you have the people who are being affected by those things. Again, we get back to that Maslow's pyramid, right? We get people who are saying like, oh, that is an issue that is affecting my day-to-day happiness and safety. You're talking about that? I'm interested in what you're talking about. Let me get involved. So we're bringing more people under the umbrella. We're getting more people talking about a bigger diversity of issues. And I'm extremely hopeful about where that's headed. I'm really excited to see more people stepping up and talking about these issues and making the skeptical community a more dynamic group that is going to accomplish more things to make the world a better place.
Can I get a big round of applause for Rebecca? All I want to say is, if you want to get involved in skepticism here in Hong Kong, please come and see me, or do your own thing. I'd love to help out. Thanks, guys. Stick around. Have a great.
Thank you, everyone.